Hello and welcome back to the GenTen time machine, and I've had some time to fix up my time machine so we don't have to worry about coming back to some alternate reality where something has stolen sound and has run off with it. In fact, we're going to go back in time looking for sound because I have a 1919 Starling phonograph player here and I need to find some new records for it. Now, I even have a fancy remote for the time machine now, so let's go. I forgot to crank it up. Now then, let's go. We arrive in the 1910s, specifically 1919. We just avoided the Great War, which would be later known as World War I. In the US, Prohibition has just begun, which let's hope doesn't lead to any sort of organized crime. But from down here in the speakeasy in which I am hiding, I find some people talking about the latest Charlie Chaplin movie they saw. Others are talking about new things they have in their homes, things like the electric vacuum, which replaced the manual powered ones.
This one's the sweeper vac, made in San Francisco. The British Queen. Doesn't seem to be doing very much, this one. A bit difficult to use, too. The Star. This one feels more comfortable. Just swept up a feather. And, the Reeves pneumatic broom doesn't sweep very much up at a time. Nearly got that bit of dirt. This is the Daisy #2. Nice action, nice crank and bellows, but I don't actually think it's getting anything off the carpet. This one is the Baby Daisy. Oh, it's much bigger than the Daisy #2. Slightly difficult coordinating all both the actions at once.
Also, the electric washing machine appeared on the market right after our last visit. It's called the Thor. It works very similarly to the modern units in which a tub spins back and forward. This is to avoid a compact mess, according to the company. Beyond appliances, we now have the world's first plastic. This may be seen as either the greatest advancement or the most sinister curse, depending on who you ask. Technically, there had been natural plastics prior to this, such as celluloid, which was used for film, but this was the first synthetic plastic known as bakelite. Bakelite is very heat resistant and durable compared to other materials at the time, and was used for electronics, jewelry, and just about anything. So I know what you're thinking. There has to be something more interesting than vacuums and plastic that happened in this decade, and you would be right. Airplanes! The first commercial airlines begin to appear in this decade. Prior to 1914, airplanes were mostly privately owned and used just as a private form of transportation. But on January 1st, 1914, the world's first commercial flight took place from St. Petersburg, Florida to Tampa. But that's just planes. What about the good old Zeppelin? And no, not the lead kind, the balloon kind. Ferdinand von Zeppelin had developed the rigid airship in 1893, and by 1910, Deutsche Luftfahrtaktiengesellschaft began using them commercially, even though Ferdinand didn't really approve of this sort of thing. And while it may be fun riding around on the traveling options of the time, unless you look at a certain cruise ship from 1912, we aren't going to be able to take home a Zeppelin. No, we came back to 1910s for something smaller and collectible, and that's phonographs. In this decade, we saw the first format war. Forget about Blu-ray versus HD DVD or Sega does what Nintendo don't. We have ourselves a war between the Victor phonograph, the Edison Diamond Disc, and the Pathy Disc in France. Technically, the phonograph was created by Berliner, but the Victor Talking Machine Company took it and ran with it. Edison, not to be outdone, created his own disc format called the Diamond Disc to compete. Edison's design had some advantages and some disadvantages over the phonograph. The standard phonograph used needles that had to be replaced after every single use, and if you were brave, you could possibly use them for a second play. If you didn't change them, the needle would get sharper and sharper and start carving away a groove on the disc. The Edison disc, however, used a diamond tip stylus, which did not need to be replaced. So why didn't the diamond disc win? Well, for one, they sounded worse. The diamond disc used the same technology as the wax cylinder, where audio was recorded in an up and down motion as compared to a side to side motion on the phonograph. This caused a lot of surface noise that the phonograph did not have. The other major factor was how many companies produced their own phonograph players. The Diamond Disc had about 3 other models outside of the Edison brand, one of which, the Bush and Lane Duovox, played both formats. So how about the third option, the Pathy Disc? Well, they began making their records out of wax-coated cement. The grooves were wider and it spun faster at 90 RPMs as compared to the 75 to 80 RPM range that the phonograph and Diamond Disc used. Eventually, they started producing standard phonographs as well, and their proprietary format just faded away. So let's go back to the future with all our discs and see what they sound like. It's nice to have a nice smooth landing back into the present time. Now, while I was back there in that speakeasy, the guy I was talking to happened to give me his World War I Victory Medal. And I have to say to him and to anybody who has ever served, thank you for your service. But now let's look at some records. Now, while I was back there, I did happen to find us some Edison Diamond discs. In fact, I found a whole crate of them. This one here happens to be called I'm on My Way to Mandalay. The only problem is while I did find a bunch of these, I didn't find a player. They really weren't as popular as a regular old phonograph, which were everywhere. Now, for phonographs, I actually have a record album. And I know what you're thinking, like a vinyl record album? No, this is where the record album name came from. As the name on it says, record album, this was an album similar to a photo album that contained records. Inside of here, this is very heavy and hard to show, is a bunch of records, and you flip through the pages and you choose which record that you want to play. Sometimes these albums were just ones that you put together yourself, much like this one, or in some situations they were sets of music, like let's say a stage play, that were just collected together into one bin. Now, one of the big differences between the Edison Diamond Disc and one of these is the size. When you're looking at one of these are relatively pretty thin. Now, let's compare that to the Edison Diamond Disc over here, which is about the equivalent to at least 2 or 3 of a regular phonograph. Outside of that, they were pretty much the same distance around. And I know what you're thinking, well, this doesn't have a color sticker. Well, I do have some phonographs that don't have color stickers as well. This one does, however, have an actual image of Thomas Edison on it. It's very hard to see, but if the light catches it just right, you can see Edison right there inside of a shield. Now, let's go hear one of these and actually set it up on the Starlet player. Here I have set up a song called You'll Find Dixieland in France. Now, the reason why I chose this record specifically is because it was made prior to World War II. One thing you have to keep in mind with these older phonographs is you typically want to play the matching records to the time period. So these are acoustic machines, and you want to play records that were recorded acoustically. Now, post-World War II, most of the records were recorded electronically. That means they had a higher volume output, which could entail some damage to the reproducer, as well as it could wear out the record faster than if you had matched them up to their correct player. Now, the way this works, once you've got the record on there, is you want to hit the brake. So we had activated the brake here, and that makes it where this doesn't really free spin. Let me show you the difference. If the brake is off, I can just spin it like that, but as soon as I hit the brake, full stop. Great. So now that's prepared, we can crank up the machine over here. Now, it's hard to tell really when you're supposed to stop, so you kind of just have to feel for it. It'll start getting tighter and tighter, kind of like a wind-up car. And when you feel like it's on the tighter side of things, stop turning. That way you don't explode the spring that's inside of here. Now here is a speed control. I have it set to about 78-ish. It's hard to really say for sure, but that's where the discs seem to sound the best. One thing I did make sure ahead of time is that the gasket on the reproducer was changed. You can see my old one here. This was the original, as far as I know, that has turned to stone, more or less. So I bought a new rubber gasket and put it on there. That way it no longer sounds like it's going to rattle to death. Now, there really isn't much else you can do on this machine. These little cups here are for the used needles, which I did put a brand new one on just for this purpose. And the only other thing that we really have is a volume control, kind of. So pretty much what you have is less or all. And that's really all you have, because all it's doing is it's opening and closing a doorway that is behind this thing right here. This is a wooden cone that pretty much just amplifies all the sound that goes down this tube and just projects it out of here. All that's doing is kind of redirecting the sound a little bit and making it either full volume or muted slightly. Now, we have cranked it up. We have it on muted slightly just so it doesn't blow away our speakers or microphone here. So let's get it spinning. Now I like to give it a second to kind of get warmed up and fully turning. And then I'm going to do this without destroying it. And just for comparison purposes, let's put it on full volume mode back here. So there's definitely a difference. Here's low volume, full volume. And just so you get an idea of what sort of speed control there was. I guess really depended how fast you wanted to dance that day. Right about here seems to be correct when playing something with a vocal to it. So yes, this is what they had in 1919. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time on the GenTen Time Machine.